Mom sold my belongings to make room for her new family. She even claimed I was a past mistake and told me to move out, but she didn't know Dad put the house in my name, and she was the one who had to leave. About a month ago, I got news from my dad's relatives that his health had been declining, so to ensure that he got the best care possible, I decided to move to his place for some time. My mom and dad were divorced, so Dad moved out, and I had to stay with Mom. Sure, we had our weekends and holiday visits, but it wasn't the same as having him around all the time. I had a very close bond with my dad, and I just missed him even more after the separation. I always felt like he understood me better than Mom and was always there for me, so when I got the news about his health, it felt like the universe was giving me a chance to be there for him the way he'd always been there for me. But life had other plans. Unfortunately, I was not able to help him much, as about a week after my visit, disaster struck, and we lost him due to a heart attack. Being Dad's only kid, I took it upon myself to take care of all the funeral arrangements. As soon as I got the news, I decided to call my mom and let her know that Dad was gone. Surely she'd want to know that the father of her child had passed away, but her response, silence. Dead silence. For a moment, I thought maybe the call had dropped or she hadn't heard me, so I repeated myself, and she just said that she heard the first time and asked what did I want her to do about it. Shock doesn't even begin to cover what I was feeling. It was like being slapped in the face. I was so stunned that I just hung up the phone. I get it. Dad was her ex-husband. She has moved on, remarried some time ago, and started a new chapter in her life. But this wasn't about their failed marriage or any lingering resentment. This was about me losing my father. Couldn't she have mustered up even an ounce of sympathy? A simple, "I'm sorry for your loss," would have sufficed. At that moment, I wanted to have a meltdown. But I didn't have that luxury. There was a funeral to plan, relatives to notify, and paperwork to handle. So there I was juggling funeral arrangements, trying to keep it together, when I got blindsided by some seriously messed up news from back home. It all started when my next-door neighbor at home gave me a call. Her daughter and I had been childhood friends, so I figured she got the news from someone and was just calling to offer condolences. Boy, was I wrong. She wanted to know why I hadn't informed her or her daughter about my supposed plans to move out. Naturally, I was caught off guard by this question. I told her that I had no such plans right now to move out and was in fact intending to return home very soon. That's when she dropped the bombshell. My lovely mother had been telling the whole neighborhood that I had suddenly decided to move out, and under that cover she'd been going through my room, cherry-picking my belongings to either sell off or chuck in the trash. We're talking about stuff I've had since childhood: my guitar, my book collection, even the vintage record player Dad got me for my 16th birthday. I connected the dots and realized the reason behind this impromptu clearance sale: to make room for her new family. That's right. My stuff was being tossed to the curbs so my stepdad's kids could have more space. I was so angry and heartbroken that as soon as I ended the call with my kind-hearted neighbor, I called Mom. Before she could say hello, I lashed out at her, asking how dare she sell my stuff, the stuff that was the last tangible memory of my dad. She sounded flustered, caught completely off guard, and kept asking how I had found out, but I pressed her, needing answers. Finally, she said her husband Greg and stepkids needed space, and they deserved to make the house their home too. I was enraged. It wasn't about sharing the space. I had no problem with the kids. In fact, even though I didn't like my stepdad very much, I had a good bond with Ethan and Mia, so I was willing to share everything with them. But to remove my belongings, to empty my room while I was away, grieving the loss of my father, was nothing but a betrayal. The thought of my things, my personal memories, being discarded so casually was both sad and infuriating. It was like she was using Dad's death as an excuse to completely erase me from her life. I told her bluntly that what she had done was unforgivable, and the least she could do was give me the money for everything she sold. Her response was the final blow. When her guilt trip did not work, she admitted that she had already spent the money on new gifts for my stepdad's kids. That's right. My childhood memories, my prized possessions, all turned into shiny new toys for my step-siblings. All of this when Mom knew that I would be leaving for college in a few months, and I would have taken almost everything that was in my room, but no, she just wanted to steal everything that I had. Talk about adding insult to injury, right out of sight, out of mind, and apparently out of house too, but my mom was a fool to think that I would just roll over and accept whatever she threw my way. Fate wasn't in her favor either, because during the funeral, my uncle and I had to sort through all of Dad's affairs. While going through his personal belongings, we stumbled upon something I never expected: a will. This completely shocked me because Dad always said he didn't believe in legal documents when it came to family. He used to say, legality destroyed relationships. Things should happen because nature intended it, not because the law says so. I never thought in a million years he'd have a will, but there it was tucked away in a safe deposit box at his bank, one I had no idea existed. Apparently he set it up after the divorce just to avoid conflict, but he left instructions with my uncle to handle things when the time was right. The content of the will was even more shocking. Not only had Dad never signed the house over to Mom after the divorce, but he had left it solely to me, his only child. All this time, Mom had been living in a house she thought was hers, completely unaware of the legal reality. Now, with Dad gone, the house was mine. Originally, I was planning to keep quiet about this. I mean, despite everything, she was still my mom, you know. I figured we could work something out, maybe come to some sort of agreement, but after this latest stunt, all bets were off. I was lucky to have my uncle by my side because he took care of the legal side of all things. I spent the next few days getting everything in order, had long talks with Uncle Joe about the legal side of all things, made some calls to real estate agents, even started looking into apartment listings, not for me, mind you, but for Mom and her bunch. Finally, after everything was sorted out, I returned to what was supposed to be my home, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. Imagine my mom's surprise when she saw me walk in with my uncle by my side. She was shocked to say the least. She must have thought that I would be begging her to let me stay in the house, but there was no chance that was happening. Her immediate reaction was to get emotional, trying to play the concerned mother and asking why I had brought a lawyer with me. She even hinted rather dramatically at whether I was planning to sue her. Meanwhile, my stepdad lounged in a chair, had a smug look on his face, clearly convinced that I had no legal standing. I asked Mom to sit down for a chat and said I had something important to discuss. I could tell that nobody was going to apologize to me in this room, so I started off calm and asked her if she remembered the details of her divorce from Dad. She again looked very confused, probably wondering where I was going with this, and then I dropped the bomb. My uncle pulled out the property documents we had found, laying them on the table. As my mom and stepdad scanned the papers, I could see the color drain from their faces. My uncle explained that to avoid any legal battle during the divorce, my dad had moved out but never transferred the property title legally. The house was still in his name, and since he had passed away, I was the sole heir. The room fell silent as the weight of the situation settled in. Suddenly, my mom lashed out. She argued that this was unfair, that she had been my dad's wife and deserved a share of the property. She tried to assert her right to the house, pointing out that she had lived there for years, making it her home too. Greg, my stepdad, also chimed in now, not as smug as earlier, but scared that his free shelter was slipping from his hands. He said that they had nowhere else to go and that it was unjust for me to take over the house. My uncle, ever the voice of reason, tried to calm the situation. He explained that the law was clear. As my dad's only child, I was the rightful owner of the property. He reminded them that this wasn't about stripping them of their home, but about recognizing my legal rights, which had been overlooked in their haste to rearrange the house and sell my belongings. He suggested that we find a reasonable solution, possibly including compensation for the items that were sold, but my mom wasn't having it. She started to accuse me of being heartless and ungrateful, of trying to punish her for moving on with her life. She claimed that she had sacrificed a lot for me, and now in her time of need, I was turning my back on her. It was a manipulative play, attempting to guilt-trip me into robbing me of my rightful claim. When that didn't work, she said she would take this to court and sue me to get what's hers. Through it all, I just sat there watching the show. It was like all those years of pent-up frustration, all the times I bit my tongue to keep the peace, were finally paying off. I finally spoke up and said that she could go ahead with that and waste both our time and her money, but we all knew what would be the outcome. In the end, I made it clear that I was not going to be unreasonable. I expressed that I was willing to give them time to find a new place, but I firmly stated that the house was now mine, and sooner or later, they are getting out of this place. I mentioned that after what had happened while I was away, it was time for my mother to move on. The drama didn't end there. Just when I thought we'd hit peak chaos, my stepdad decided to make everything more tense. He stormed out of the room, and for a brief moment I thought maybe he'd finally accepted defeat, but I was again very wrong. About 20 minutes later, he came barging back in, but this time he wasn't alone. He had brought Ethan and Mia with him. The kids looked confused and a little scared, clearly not understanding why they'd been dragged into this mess. He pointed to his children and expressed that I was not just evicting them, but also taking away shelter from innocent kids, questioning if that was truly what I wanted. I could tell that he was mocking me, and with his exaggerated concern, attempting to paint me as the villain in the situation. I'll be honest, for a moment, that got me, and I hesitated going forward with the plan. If I kicked these kids out of the house that they had started seeing as their home, then I wasn't any better than my mom. My uncle looked at me in a concerned manner and told me not to get trapped in their manipulative schemes, and that the best we could do right now was come to a settlement that was fair to everyone, so we finally came to a decision that nobody would be kicked out of the house. As soon as my mom and stepdad heard the news, they relaxed, probably thinking they'd won with their little emotional blackmail stunt. The relief on their faces was clearly visible. Mom even made a move like she was going to hug me, but I held up a hand, stopping her in her tracks. This was not the end. The only way they would be allowed to stay in the house was by paying rent. It would be a fair market rate which will be determined by an independent assessor, and we would sign an agreement to ensure proper transactions. The change in the room was instant. It was like I'd flipped a switch from relief to rage. Mom's face went from grateful to furious in about half a second flat. Stepdad looked like he was about to pop a blood vessel. Mom started screaming that she was not paying rent to live in her own home. I gently reminded her once again that it was not her home anymore, and considering that she tried to sell off all my stuff and kick me out, I think rent is more than fair. Uncle stepped in, reasoning that this was a very generous offer, and this would ensure that my step-siblings were also raised in this home. For a moment, it looked like they might actually see sense. The kids were nodding, probably relieved they wouldn't have to move schools or leave their friends, but then stepdad decided to take things to a whole new level. Before anyone could react, stepdad shoved Uncle, screaming that he put me up to everything, calling him all sorts of stuff. Everything after that happened in a blur. I rushed to help Uncle Joe up. Mom was screaming at stepdad to calm down and holding him back. My step-siblings looked horrified, backing away from their raging father. Things got real intense, and my uncle got up and took out his phone to call 911. He warned Greg that he should think very carefully about his next move, as assault is a serious offense, and he also has a witness here. Stepdad looked like he was about to launch himself at Uncle Joe again, but Mom grabbed his arm finally, seeming to realize how out of control things had gotten. Eventually, the cops showed up and took statements from everyone. Stepdad tried to play it cool, but the officers weren't buying his "it was just a misunderstanding" routine. In the end, when Uncle didn't press any charges, the cops gave stepdad a stern warning and told him to cool off elsewhere for the night. As he was leaving, he told me that this wasn't over. After the dust settled, I laid down the law for one last time. I told Mom and the kids they could stay, but stepdad was no longer welcome. Rent would start next month, non-negotiable. Mom tried to argue, but one look at Uncle was enough to shut her up. As for the kids, I pulled them aside later, told them I was sorry they got caught in the middle of all this, promised them that no matter what happened between the adults, they'd always have a place to stay if they needed it. So here we are. The house is mine. Stepdad's out, and Mom's giving me the silent treatment, which honestly is an improvement over the screeching. My step-siblings are walking on eggshells, and I'm left wondering if I did the right thing. I mean, I know legally I'm in the clear, but morally that's where I'm stuck, so Reddit, here's my question. Ida, for kicking out my stepdad and charging my mom rent for a house that's legally mine from which they tried to evict me, did I go too far, or was I just standing up for myself? Update 1. Hi guys, I don't know where to even begin because a lot has happened in the past few days, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happened. First off, I want to express my deepest gratitude to all of you who took the time to read my last post offer advice and send supportive messages. It's genuinely been a relief knowing that there are people out there who understand and care. After the dust settled from the initial confrontation, things around here have been tense to say the least. Mom has been alternating between two equally frustrating tactics. On one hand, she's giving me the silent treatment, while on the other hand, when she does decide to grace me with her voice, it's to guilt trip me. We're talking full on, after all I've done for you, and I carried you for 9 months level drama. It's exhausting to say the least. Stepdad's been MIA since the cops told him to cool off, which, let's be honest, has been a blessing in disguise. Now on to the more positive developments. I had a long heart-to-heart meeting with my uncle, and I can't even begin to express how grateful I am for everything he's done. This man has been my rock through this entire ordeal. I felt terrible about him getting hurt because of my stepdad's outburst, but you know what he said? That's what family is for, just like that, brushing it off like it was nothing. He didn't hold a grudge against me for even a second, which honestly made me feel even worse, but also incredibly loved and supported. He advised me, just like everyone else, to stay away from my stepdad for my own safety. We've been documenting everything from the initial confrontation to every interaction since, just in case things escalate further. We met with a real estate agent to get a fair assessment of the property value and determine a reasonable rent. I had no idea how much the house was actually worth, or what constituted fair market value for rent in our area. In short, it was a crash course in real estate that I never expected to need, but I'm grateful for the knowledge. Of course, Mom was not okay with the rent figure because, according to her, the house couldn't possibly be worth that much. That's when the agent came to the rescue and pointed out that the figure was actually below market rate for the area, considering the size and location of the house. We've also started the process of formally evicting my stepdad. Given his violent outburst, we had grounds to file for an immediate eviction. Mom tried to argue against it, of course. She pulled out all the stops, tears, pleading, even trying to downplay what had happened. But I stood my ground. I made it crystal clear that his behavior was completely unacceptable and that I wouldn't feel safe with him in the house. It was hard seeing her break down like that, but I kept reminding myself of everything that had led to this point. Sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind, right? On a note, my step-siblings have been spending more time with me, which has definitely been an improvement. What made me the happiest was that Ethan and Mia saved one of my old watches that my dad had bought me. They also saved some other small stuff that my mom was going to sell. I think they're feeling just as lost and confused as I am in all of this, and we found some comfort in each other's company. I have decided to be as transparent with them as possible about what's going on. They're old enough to understand, and I think they appreciate being treated like adults in this situation. We've had some long talks about everything. Their feelings about their dad's behavior, their worries about the future, even their guilt about what their stepmom, my mom, did with my stuff. At the same time, I'm trying my best to protect them from their dad. Who knows what's going on in his head right now? I've made it clear to them that if he tries to contact them or shows up at the house, they need to let me or Mom know immediately. I'm trying my best to make sure that everything is properly sorted before I leave for college, so that's where things stand now. It's been a whole lot of work for the past few days, but I feel like I'm finally starting to get everything under control. There's still a long road ahead, legal jargon, family therapy, which I'm strongly considering for all of us, and rebuilding trust. But for the first time since Dad died, I feel like I'm taking control of my life. Thanks again for all your support, Reddit. It's meant more than you know. I'll update again if anything major happens, but for now, I'm taking it one day at a time. Wish me luck. Update 2. Hey everybody, hope all of you are doing great. I saw many of the questions that you guys had and thought that it would be nice if I answered some of them, so to address a few common questions. Yes, I am keeping detailed records of everything, including my mom's selling of my belongings. I have also changed the locks on the house with copies only for myself, Mom, and my step-siblings. I'm looking into setting up cameras for security purposes just in case Greg tries anything. For those asking about legal action against Mom for selling my stuff, I'm currently exploring options with my uncle. Right now, though, my primary focus is on stabilizing the living situation and ensuring that the house remains a safe space for me and everybody else. It's been a challenging time, but I'm trying to take things one step at a time. Reading through your questions made me reflect on the past, and I realized there were many warning signs of trouble long before everything blew up. I thought it might be helpful to share some background that could shed light on how we ended up here. As some of you know, after my parents divorced, they decided it was best for me to live with my mom while my dad visited me periodically. This arrangement worked relatively well until Greg, my stepdad, came into the picture. Looking back, the problem started almost immediately after their wedding. The house, which had always been my home, began to feel increasingly foreign. Greg, under the guise of casual conversation, frequently brought up the idea of me moving out. He'd suggested during dinner, as if it were a normal thing for a teenager to consider. I was only 17 at the time, so the idea of moving out was both impractical and unsettling. He'd also probe into my relationship with my dad, subtly hinting that I could live with him as well. This constant questioning felt intrusive and uncomfortable, but I brushed it off, thinking he was just socially awkward. Greg also had a habit of questioning my financial readiness, often asking if I had saved enough money for my future. At the time, I worked part-time to save for college, but his questions seemed more like hints that I should be planning to leave. Reflecting on these interactions, I now see them as not-so-subtle attempts to push me out of the household. It was clear he was trying to make me feel like an outsider in my own home. There were also many incidents where Mom and Greg would ask me to lend my things to Mia, Greg's daughter. Initially, I didn't mind because it seemed like a reasonable request, and Mia always returned my items in good condition. However, the situation escalated when my mom asked me to give my laptop, which I had recently bought for school, to Ethan, Greg's son. By give, she meant permanently hand it over to him. I politely declined, explaining that all my study materials were on that laptop and that I needed it for schoolwork. Greg's reaction to my refusal was over the top, to say the least. He acted as if I had committed a crime, telling Ethan and Mia to avoid me, as if I were the villain in the scenario. It was an eye-opening moment that was a reminder of how little my needs and belongings were respected in this new family dynamic. Despite all these red flags, I stayed. Part of the reason was practical. I was saving money for college, and moving out would have been financially difficult, but another part of me held on to the hope that things would improve, that my mom would have eventually remember that I was her child too, and treat me accordingly. It was a naive hope, I know now. I've been talking to my therapist about all this, trying to process the years of subtle and not-so-subtle rejection. It's been challenging to come to terms with the fact that my own mother could treat me this way, prioritizing her new family over me, but I'm working through it in a weird way. I'm almost grateful for how things turned out. If they hadn't gone to such extremes, I might have continued making excuses for their behavior, downplaying the impact it was having on me. This experience, painful as it has been, forced me to confront the reality of the situation and take steps to reclaim my life. Thanks to every commentator who had advice and suggestions for me. All of you helped me a lot in this tough time. Update 3. Hello, people. I have some major updates. Things have taken an unexpected turn. Yesterday, I received a call from someone I never expected to hear from: Greg's ex-wife, Ethan, and Mia's mother. In a small town like ours, news travels fast, and she had caught wind of the recent developments. She reached out, asking if we could meet up for a conversation. Curiosity got the best of me, and I agreed, and we decided to meet for coffee. After some initial pleasantries, she got straight to the point and dropped a bombshell that I hadn't seen coming. She revealed that for years Greg had been skimping on his child support payments. He had been using the excuse of helping to support the household with my mom to justify not paying her what she was owed. This revelation added a new layer of complexity to the already tangled situation at home. She explained that the child support payments were legally mandated, but Greg had manipulated the situation to make it appear as though his financial contributions to our household were sufficient. In reality, he had been neglecting his legal obligations to his children. The ex-wife's suspicion that my stepdad wanted to keep Ethan and Mia living with him in our house was motivated by a desire to avoid paying child support. By having the kids live with him, he could argue that he was directly supporting them, thereby reducing or even eliminating his financial obligations to her. It became clear that Greg's insistence on maintaining control over the living arrangements wasn't just about convenience or family unity. It was financially motivated. He had been prioritizing his own financial interests over the well-being of his children and his legal responsibilities. Ethan and Mia's mother also told me that it had been years since she hadn't seen her kids, because Greg would move from one place to another. She then asked if I would be willing to testify about the living situation if it came to a legal battle. She wanted me to confirm the extent of her ex-husband's involvement in the household and the truth about his financial contributions or lack thereof. Realizing the potential impact of this information, I agreed to testify. It was important to set the record straight and ensure that Ethan and Mia received the support they deserved. This new development meant that my stepdad was not only facing eviction from the house due to the legal ownership issue, but also potentially looking at legal trouble for unpaid child support. If he failed to pay court-ordered child support, it could lead to serious consequences, including fines and even jail time. This must be another reason why he had suddenly disappeared. Greg's ex-wife also wanted to meet her kids, and I told her that we could definitely schedule a meeting for that. I am sure that Mia and Ethan would love to meet their mother after so long. I also told Mom about all of this, and initially she was in denial that her husband would never do that. But when she listened to the whole thing, she looked as dumbstruck as I did. Even though I haven't forgiven her yet for everything that happened, I still felt a little bad because she was a victim of betrayal now. But knowing her, it's very difficult for me to sympathize with her, so I think we all have established now that the main villain here is Greg, my stepdad. Of course, my mom is no saint either, but I guess that's what she is paying for. We all are hoping that everything with Greg is also settled as quickly as possible, so that all of us can go back to our normal lives. I am so grateful to all of you for getting me through this because I never thought that I could have managed all of this. You guys gave me some of the most incredible advice during this difficult time. I'll keep you posted on any new developments. Take care and thank you for being there.